Hi everyone, my name is Mac Hudson. I work for Prison Legal Service and Community Liaison / Paralegal for Racial Equity and Correction Initiative. And I know that although some folks are working their way here, we wanted to kind of expedite the process and get it moving because I know we're on a set time frame. And so for the convenience and to expedite that matter, I'm going to ask Senator Elridge and State Rep Mary Keefe to the stage so that we can get them seated as panelists. And we have one more panelist that's on its way. And hopefully as folks start to come in, they'll be able to kind of go with the flow and update themselves about what's happening. So, Mary. Okay. And I want to just first thank all of you for coming out and participating in our forum, because this is a very urgent and most important issue. You know, it impacts Black and brown folks on a large scale. And to that, I wanted to introduce Latoya Whiteside, who's the director of REICI, Racial Equity and Correction Initiative. I almost forgot my own. But anyway, I wanted to introduce her as I know she's projected on the screen. Latoya, can you hear us? And she would talk about a little bit about what REICI is, what we do, and the pending of the bill.
As Matt said, my name is Latoya Whiteside. I'm a senior attorney and also the founder and director of the Race Equity and Corrections Initiative. I realize that we're running a bit behind, so I'll keep my portion brief. I just briefly wanted to sort of give you background regarding REICI and the work that we do with PLS, as well as talking just a bit about the legislation that we're pushing, and then Matt will go into a more detailed presentation of that. So just to give you background, REICI which stands for the Race Equity and Corrections Initiative. It's essentially an organization-wide effort throughout PLS to address the institutional racism and impact on Black and brown prisoners in the day-to-day operations of Massachusetts prisons and jails. Our mission is to build awareness, solutions, and leadership to combat discriminatory treatment of Black and brown prisoners in correctional operations, and we do that through client and legislative advocacy, community building, education, as well as internal efforts in order to increase our staff's understanding of race equity and as well as anti-racism policy. Right now, our biggest item on our agenda, of course, is legislation, but during our day-to-day operations, we have developed several projects which are assisting Black and brown prisoners with privacy issues and systemic issues that they're having from behind the wall. We also are working on a canteen project to incorporate culturally appropriate canteen items. On commissary, we have a prisoner empowerment in which we work with specifically incarcerated liaisons to assist PLS in our advocacy efforts. We also have a project specifically designed to ensure equitable access to MAT treatment for Black and brown prisoners. So, of course, a lot of the work that we're doing focuses on issues that Black and brown prisoners have identified as being discriminatory in nature. And so, again, that's our focus. The legislation that we're going to talk about today is designed to create an independent correctional oversight office. This legislation largely stems from the recommendations of the Special Legislative Commission on Structural Racism. From that report, one of the biggest issues that particularly came across, which I was a commissioner on that body, and one of the biggest issues that we experienced was the lack of substantive racial demographics. In the state of Massachusetts and also in other states, no state is currently mandated to collect substantive racial demographics, but specifically in the state of Massachusetts, only population trends, crime trends, and very minimum information regarding solitary confinement is regarding race, so that makes it very difficult for organizations such as REICI to be able to challenge issues stemming from structural racism. And so a large part of our goal is, one, to begin to collect that information from a grassroots level, and then also to uplift and hopefully garner enough support to pass our legislation, which would not only mandate the collection of substantive racial demographics, but it would also allow an enforcement mechanism which would require DOC to essentially comply with the recommendations of this independent oversight office. There's a number of other tools that will continue to assist with structural racism and combating discriminatory treatment. One being the creation of a community council that would have nomination authority and would also be composed of directly impacted persons. We have also incorporated mechanisms to assure accountability and transparency, as well as compliance with anti-racism standards. The office would also be required to disclose information to the public and alleviate the need of submitting public records requests, which seem to be very time-consuming. And then finally, the legislation would prohibit the retaliation for individuals who would assist office members with their investigations as well as their reporting. Mac, again, this is very brief, but I want to keep us on time, so I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just give me 1 second, please. I'll navigate this process here. Now, I should never be left in charge of anything technical. I'm going to tell y'all that right now. Okay, where am I trying to navigate? Okay. I just thought I had this. Okay, here we go. All right, so this is one of the things I want to kind of project to y'all is the reason, as you heard Latoya talk about, one of the initiatives we have is the legislation that's currently pending, and we already had a hearing in the judiciary, and now it's pending in public safety. And so I wanted to kind of talk to you about more so why are we pushing for this, right? And so in order to understand it, I wanted to kind of present this presentation so that we all can get on the same page and understand what are the entitlements that those who are incarcerated have. One, I wanted to first start you off with the Ominous Correctional Reform Act, which is a 1972 bill that was passed a long time ago, and that was like in the national reform. I don't know how many of y'all ever heard of Attica and the crisis that came out of Attica, but it created a national reform, and in Massachusetts, we also adopted some reforms, and that was this bill here, which gave everyone incarcerated in these certain entitlements, right? Which is the required rehabilitation program in Massachusetts prisons, access to work release, furloughs, and it mandated a progressive classification system, right? And when I say that, it means that at every level, it's supposed to serve as a step down. One meaning you come from high security, medium security, then lower security, and then pre-release, which then sets you for a transition into society where you come out with some sort of economic stability to yourself, right? And as well as a work ethic to accompany that. General Law 124, Section 1 is actually what entitles the commissioner. This is what the legislators gave the commissioner as the duty. And what I want to focus on is this real brief point. This is the duty of the commissioner: to establish, maintain, and administer, and including but not limited to education, training, and employment of persons committed to the custody of department, designed as far as practicable to prepare and assist each such person to assume the responsibility and the exercise the rights of the citizens of the Commonwealth. That is what the mandate of the Department of Correction is. It isn't to punish. It isn't to turn the prisons into warehouse. It is to prepare them to actually prepare them to participate as citizens. This is what I want to resonate with everybody. The reason why I want to harken on this is because in every aspect of everyone's institutional lives, especially as it relates to black and brown individuals, there is this discriminatory process that's set in place that deprives them every entitlement, right? But the one thing that we've come to find out as black and brown folks who experience this day to day, that unless it's attached to white life, it doesn't have any value, right? So even though that these things been going on for decades, the denial of entitlements, the holding folks in high security, the basics, fundamental breakdowns of families through the visiting room and all those things, and even that led to a number of deaths and suicides by black and brown folks, none of this caught media attention until the death of John Gagan. When John Gagan, who was a former priest, who actually got killed in maximum security for being overclassed, meaning that he wasn't supposed to be in high security facility. He was overclassed there by some correctional officers who ticketed him because they didn't like his crime or alleged crime at the time, and also along with some administrators who turned a blind eye to that fact, right? And it's so well known in the Department of Correction that we now refer to it as Gagan tactics when we're being subjected to it, right? It's a form of retaliation in which they pit against those who specifically advocate on behalf of prisoners, but it's particularly if you're black and brown, right? So I just wanted to kind of highlight this because what happened was a commission was formed at the height of that. This commission was by Governor Romney, who then created the Governor Council and Corrections Committee, and what he did was he brought together all these folks. And this is what I wanted to highlight. All these professionals. It's called the Blue Ribbon Commission, right? 15 current and former correction officers, legislators, community leaders, and criminal justice experts who all came together and said, hey, we have 18 recommendations for the Department of Corrections. We want them to adopt these recommendations, and one of which was fix the classification process so that you can alleviate the gestations that's caused by maintaining people in high security that don't belong there, right? Give them access to programs. And what they classified at was remedy the idleness that you have them in there, right? And so this was a mandate that they adopted. And then the other one was fix the grievances process so that there is some transparency, some accountability for when we have these types of wrongs by officers, that this will be done, right? And then there was, of course, managing the budget. So I'm going to show you, these were the 18 recommendations so that you see them yourself that was adopted. And what I just focused on was the first 5, or these 6 rather, which the department and the commission at the time, Kathleen Denny, who was the first woman commissioner who grown up in the system, literally, right? She grown up in the system, saw every aspect of it, and then became commissioner by Mitt Romney, and decided to stop the abuse based on Mitt Romney's mandate that he did not want to hear not a single abuse coming out of the Department of Correction as it relates to physical assaults. And she was tasked with that, and she did do that, and it brought on retaliation. Now you might be asking, by who? Who would want to retaliate on something like that? Well, it wasn't certainly not the prisoners. It was the correctional officers themselves, the union. They charged her with creating an instability in the institution by disciplining them for actually physically assaulting inmates. Isn't that almost like benign? It's like backwards, right? One of the things that I wanted to focus on was number 15. And this kind of leads up to what we're asking for today. The department should ensure the policies and procedures are properly implemented through oversight and accountability systems, including an independent investigative authority, data management, and unit management. Well, Kathleen Dennehy came out herself as a commissioner, someone homegrown, and said, I agree with this. She's quoted in this article. We do need oversight. We need someone to do it. We can't do it all on our own. Now I want to show you, just so you understand this completely. Men and women, supposed to have the right to observe their religious rights under the statute. This is the statute, General Law 127, Section 88, that allows that practice, right? But when it comes to blacks, anything that's related to black religious or categorized as black religion, whether it's called Islam, whether it's called the Nation of Gods on Earth, whether it's called Jah, or the Rastafarians, what we find is that they are forced to go to court in every instance to litigate against the department, even though the statute gives them clearly this right. So what I'm trying to show you is that there's a clear obstruction of these entitlements. This is not something that I'm saying. This is over a period from 89 all the way up to the present day of 2022-23 cases that's still being litigated today. And then we had the statute, which said all along we don't use segregation as a punishment. We use segregation to administrate, meaning to remove a person who's trying to cause harm to himself, to the property, institution, what have you, and we separate them for a period of time. Well, the Department of Correction had turned that into a punishment unit. And by implementing various different measures, such as no TV, access to no radio at times, only you're locked in your cell 23 hours with access to only an hour a day, and most importantly, mental health access. You're supposed to have mental health access. Well, just recently, in December of 2022, there was a report that came out by the Department of Justice that agrees that the Department of Correction haven't given men access to the mental health before, during, or after. And many of these folks are then tasked with the ability to come on out here in society and try to adjust and not even getting the proper care when they first was in, and then come out here and trying to assume all the responsibility that life takes its toll, and then try to adjust to what we say today is the normal standards of today's society standards. Here is the statute, and this is the reason why I want to show you. Here's the statute entitlements. This is what the law requires, and this is what the department has done, right? So we have the classification, which requires them to get classed. After being classed, they are subject to reclassification based on their present behavior and adjustment period. And this is done under 127A and 12720A and 20. And when I tell you that even today, as we stand here, that every review, there is a class of prisoners that don't even get a 3-panel board, in which the statute itself, as you read it, requires them to do that. And unless you challenge that, which 2 instances has been challenged recently in 2022, where the court has said, no, you need a 3-panel board. It can't be a 1-panel board. entitled to that, right? They are still doing that, giving men one board classification in order to hold them up in high security, whether that's a medium or minimum. And for a very long time, this has become the equivalent of who's getting access to now lower security minimum beds. Well, let me tell you, from direct observation and for something that we've already know, it isn't black and brown folks. Now I want to show you, Mass General Law 127, Section 90A is the furlough, and the regulations in which the Department of Corrections adopted was 103 CMRs 463, Section 10. And I wanted to highlight this specifically because giving out furloughs is discretionary. I concede that. But holding those board hearings is mandatory. They have to set up a panel in every institution from maximum, medium, all the way down to minimum. And they're supposed to give men access, men and women access to this process in order to evaluate them for the ability to be able to go to and from prison. And let me tell you, since they removed this, by the way, men and women who would otherwise qualify for commutation was completely decimated from even the opportunity of actually having a meaningful consideration of commutation because they couldn't prove extraordinary conduct, which is one of the elements that you have to prove. Extraordinary conduct. Me being in a minimum security prison by itself with good conduct doesn't mean exemplary conduct. In fact, they tell you at parole, being good by itself is not warranted for parole. You still have to meet all the other criteria. And today, even though we've had this amendment into the, and I applaud Governor Healy for adopting a lot of these other things to consider, but still, we still not have a definition for exemplary conduct absent furloughs, a way to really measurably test a person's ability to be trusted back in society. And with the elimination of minimums for those who are doing second degrees and first degrees, how would they apply given that? Well, this process says that they're entitled to hold these hearings in everyone across the board, whether you're doing life all the way up to a 3 to 5 for a car. They're being denied summary. No one's getting this process. And then here we go, the grievance. Now, for the sake of time, I just wanted to kind of show you certain things. And I kind of highlighted this in a few of my meetings. Men are entitled, even down to the basic level hygienes. They're entitled to 5 pairs of underwear, socks, just for hygienes. The state pays for this, right? Today, they're only given 3 for 6 months. This was supposed to last men and women for 6 months. And if they don't have the money to purchase that, so what? This is a fact. One of the things that came out of the commission also was to institute fiscal sponsoring, right? Discipline. As you can see, they highlighted that there was a startling pattern of weak management performance and leadership, but it led to this exorbitant amount of overtime in which officers were getting paid. I think they estimated it to be, if I'm correct, something like, what was it, 438 million of the budget? So here's the interesting thing I want you to kind of look at. Massachusetts DOC population has dropped. We know that. From 2013 to the present, it's only 6,000, and now they say it's even lower than that. It's approximately about 5,000 and some change. Yet the DOC budget is steadily increasing. 2023 is $775.6 million, and it's on track for the 2024 to be almost $809 million. The average incarcerated person, as you can see in 2023, is 127 million, right? And it's on track for 2024 to be 134. The question is, this is money that's supposed to be allocated towards programs. Even when I say programs, I'm talking about visitation, I'm talking about clothing, I'm talking about food, I'm talking, all these things are what they call programs, so that you understand, right? And it's supposed to be the minimum standard of society. This is what they said, this minimum standards, right? Where is all this money going to? Because we're not seeing it. They're not even getting the basic hygienes. So where's this money going? Yet when we evaluate the payroll, we see an increasing payroll of DOC. Right? On average, it's rising almost 39%. And the overtime is on track steadily, still. In 2022, look at this. Here's the correction officers' supervisory 1, 2, and 3 levels. In 2021, basic average was 322,000. This is in overtime. It's going to increase to almost 23%. And that makes up almost $53 million of the total budget. Now, the reason why I wanted to painstakingly take y'all through this is because this is the reason why we are asking for this legislation to be passed. We need folks who understand that, like Kathleen Dennehy, who said, hey, we can't do it by ourselves, right? We need some outside entity to come in and help us actualize accountability, right? Now, this is a constant professional. No one can knock her for anything that she said and done, and of course, everybody can find reason to. You know, I didn't agree with every decision she made, but when she speaks the truth, she speaks the truth. As a professional, nonetheless, keep in mind 15 other folks, constant professional of the DOC, agreed to these recommendations also. So we're asking for that oversight committee, and I wanted to kind of move into the next course of our panel discussion by raising some questions in and around experiences of some of the formerly incarcerated, along with our distinguished guests, Senator Jamie Elridge, and State Rep. Mary Keith. I wanted to first just go around and introduce some of our panelists today and have them introduce themselves, starting with my brother here.
Hello, hello.
Can you hear?
Hello, hello.
Can y'all hear him?
I might.
Yeah, there you go.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Ahmad Bright. I'm a formerly incarcerated individual, was arrested at 17 for, sentenced with second degree murder, meaning that I spent about 15 and a half years in prison before being released on parole. I've been out actually now for 2 years, and I started a foundation where we have a sports youth development program out of Boston, helping black and brown boys develop tennis skills as well as like life skills. And I'm currently a student at Columbia University, where I'm actually transferring in January.
Good afternoon. Well, you're giving us stiff necks. Do you know that? Because we can't, presentation. My name is Mary Keith. I'm the state representative, or one of them, here in Worcester. And before I came into office 10 years ago, I worked as a community organizer in the Piedmont neighborhood. And that's my district now. And I'm really so, I don't know what the word, grateful to feel like the work that I'm doing at the State House, or that we do at the State House, is really making a difference for people that are trying to get back into community and really start a new life. And for my district, this is really important. We were heavily impacted by incarceration over time, and we continue to work together to make that change. So thank you for being here today. I look forward to sharing some ideas.
Hello? Yo? My name is Kentel Weaver, formerly incarcerated. I went to jail when I was 16. I went to prison when I was 16, and I did 19 years, and I just got out last November. Thank you. November 30th to be exact. And yeah, I came home at 35. I just turned 36 a couple months ago. And yeah, I'm doing this whole reentry process of a portion of what it looks like. It hasn't been easy, I can tell you that, and we can talk a little bit about that later. But while I was in there, I did the Tufts University Prison Initiative program, so I was able to get an associate's degree while I was in there, and I'm probably 32 credits short of a bachelor's degree, so I'm working on that right now, and I'm doing my term reentry program, and just seeing how far this education thing can take me. So, that's a little bit about me.
I'm David Dobale. I went into prison at 21 years old. I came home at 29. Currently a civic studies major at Tufts. I go to Cantel. And I've been home for about a year. And I currently work at a nonprofit involved in the city of Roxbury. I work with Justice Involved Youth. I write my own programming, my own curriculum. And I just love to build community for people who are formerly incarcerated. And I work with reentry as well.
So good afternoon, I'm State Senator Jamie Eldridge. So thank you so much for having me, and Matt, thank you so much for organizing this and Prisoners Legal Services. I participated with a similar REICI forum in Roxbury about a month ago, and that's when it was the first chance I got to see Mac's presentation, just incredibly powerful. I serve with, as Representative Keith mentioned, as the co-chair of the Criminal Justice Reform Caucus, and so great to be with fellow panelists here who have lived experience, and look forward to the conversation. I just want to say, when you look at the presentations by Mac, the fact that, one of the first commissions was 1972, so 4 decades ago, right? And then, a commission in 2004 by a Republican governor, but most of the recommendations of which have not been implemented. And last session, I co-chaired with former Representative Mika Eligardo a special commission on structural racism in correctional facilities that has a whole host of recommendations. And obviously, we urgently need these recommendations to be implemented. But I think the point is, as LaToya Whiteside presented from PLS, is that's why we need this legislation proposed by Senator Miranda and Representative Russell Holmes, independent correctional oversight, because legislators like myself and Mary and other legislators that go into the prisons and try to hold the DOC accountable, we're doing our best, but at the end of the day, I do think you need this independent agency to have the oversight, to have the power to, more directly question staff and correction officers and really address the massive inequities that are built into the system. So grateful for all the stakeholders that have worked on this legislation, including led by PLS, and look forward to the conversation. And thanks everybody for coming here to Worcester. Appreciate it.
First, I just want to give them a warm round of applause for just being here. Come on. And I wanted to start our round of questioning with the senator. And I want you to talk a little bit more about some of the recommendations that came out of the structural racism in correction, excuse me. I think I had too much coffee. So I wanted to kind of talk about that specifically, if you can. What were some of the challenges that that commission faced? And then what were some of the recommendations, if you will? And then were any of those recommendations adopted?
Absolutely. Well, so thank you so much. So first of all, just to, in some ways set the table and show the connection, right, is that this special commission, as well as two other special commissions on structural racism and other commissions, were all formed as part of the 2020 police reform in response to the outrage over police killing and injuring mostly black civilians across the country, and making that connection between the structural racism that happens in all of our communities and also in the prison system. So that's how this special commission was formed as part of that. And to Mac's question is, I co-chaired this last session, so it was a 2-year commission with former Representative Nika Elagardo, a representative from Jamaica Plain, from Boston, and we had a whole bunch of recommendations which still need to be implemented, but I just want to run through some of the sort of findings, because it gives you an idea of what the environment is like in our prisons. And we identified 4 types of structural racism within the prisons: institutional, systemic, interpersonal, and internalized. So I won't go through all the examples, but institutional. So the fact that when I go into the prisons, when anyone goes into the prisons, it's almost an entirely white workforce, right? Almost all white correction officers, almost all white staff. And therefore, if there isn't a focus on increasing the diversity of the staff, that's going to lead to generally very negative outcomes in terms of how the white staff, doesn't have the same experiences over a disproportionately Black and Latino prison population. So that's, that was one of the findings, and how it carries over to healthcare. There's been a lot of studies recently about how doctors, nurses, medical professionals don't properly appreciate or don't recognize patients who are Black or Latino and their pain versus white patients, right? Well, that's going to be even worse in the prison system in terms of if there's a complaint from a prisoner who has a mental health concern, and a white officer or a white staff person dismissing that and say that's just in your mind, you don't really have a mental health concern, versus when a white incarcerated person brings that up. So those are examples of institutional jobs. We heard from a lot of, and this is one of the powerful parts of the commission, we heard from a lot of incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people, is the jobs, is that more often than not, the white incarcerated men and women got the better jobs, got the jobs that were either easier or sort of seen as more high level than some of the other kind of jobs. So those are some of the institutional racism issues we saw. Systemic, and systemic again has to do with the society and the community and the Commonwealth, and then therefore who is in prison and who is not. So whether you're talking about over-policing Black and brown communities, that's obviously going to lead to more Black and brown residents and citizens being incarcerated. That's partly why you see those really disturbing disproportionate realities, as well as the fact that when someone who is Black or Latino is convicted of a crime, they're getting longer sentences. And how does that carry over? Well, okay, someone who has a longer sentence in the prison is therefore not going to be able to access as many programs because of the classification system. Not to mention that it's harder to get to a lower classification if you have a longer sentence. And so that means that disproportionately black and brown incarcerated men and women are not going to be able to access the programming and the education, not only to better themselves, but, going before the parole board, often who ask, what kind of programs did you participate in, what kind of education, and therefore that, benefits even further white incarcerated people from getting released by the parole board. Interpersonal, we have heard time and time again that some, I can't say what percent, but some white correction officers, using racial slurs against black and brown incarcerated people. And just to give a sense of, how that can unfold is that one of the things that a group of legislators, we went to Susan Baranowski prison after there was some violence in January 2020 between some, not a lot, but some of the incarcerated men and some of the correction officers. What we found out, and still hoping this comes out in some of the investigations, since it's frustrating that it hasn't come out, is that there were racial slurs directed by the correction officers to some of the Latino incarcerated men, and that's what caused violence. So we have to keep that in mind, is that there's reasons why there's unrest, why there's tension and often a kind of violent dynamic within the prisons, is how the disproportionately white staff and correction officers treat the disproportionately people of color incarcerated people, as well as punishment. So if you are black or Latino, you're more likely getting a punishment compared to someone who is white. So that's the interpersonal, and then the internalized, which still kind of shocked me when we went into the prisons and we heard in the commission report, is internalized is that asking now a good number of the incarcerated men and women where they have the iPads or the screens, or just a radio or something to play music, is asking, well, I'm Latino, I wanna be able to access Latino music, or I'm black, I want to listen to black music, and being denied, right? I mean, it's just absurd versus music that traditionally is preferred or enjoyed by white incarcerated people. MCA Norfolk, supposed to be one of the more forward-thinking prisons in the state, still has a lot of problems. The African American Advisory Committee, AACC, asked to show the documentary, The 13th Amendment, the connection between, yes, the U.S. Constitution repealing slavery, except allowing it as far as incarceration goes in our country, asking to show that documentary and being denied by the superintendent at MCA Norfolk because it would upset, the black prisoners. How disturbing that is to suggest that just showing a documentary that speaks directly to the experience of many black people in the United States would somehow be considered a concern, not show something that speaks deeply to their experience. So that was some of the internalized racism. So those are some of the examples from the findings. I won't go into too much detail in terms of the recommendations, but obviously first hiring, so hiring more diverse staff. One of the recommendations is to allow more self-improvement groups, which is something we're working on. So Representative Keefe and I really give Representative Keefe a tremendous amount of credit on this, and she got the Department of Corrections Commissioner Carol Michi to agree to a quarterly 2-hour meeting to discuss all these issues, right? It's not enough for us to be going into the prisons, but we need to have these direct meetings with the person who's making the decisions. Commissioner Michi is, we've talked about self-improvement groups. So, Black, Latino, Asian, LGBTQ, other identifications, is, why is the DOC not allowing more of these groups to form, to talk about their experiences, to talk about the discrimination against them, to talk about, change, in some ways, the lives, the experiences they had before they got to prison. So that's one of the recommendations, is to allow more self-improvement groups. And then the third recommendation, because I don't want to talk too long, is around classification. I already talked about that a little bit before, but think about what a major barrier classification is. If you are in a maximum security prison, you're not going to be able to access as many programs. You're not going to perhaps have an ability to get a college degree or have vocational training. And again, it's not just about using that training or education once you're out, but think about how going through those programs is going to create a better culture in the prison. It's going to reduce violence. It's going to reduce the tension that often exists, especially in a place like Susan Baranowski. So, looking to change the classification system, which again I think has massive structural racism problems. But looking beyond that, the classification issues of it holds so many people back that they can't go to a medium, they can't go to a minimum, and therefore they can't access the programming. Not to mention a culture that's definitely better as far as feeling safer, feeling more supportive, and having better reentry services that can be able to contribute upon release. So those are some of the recommendations from the report. It is online. I can send the link through Mac. But Mac, thanks again for organizing this, and those are my comments for now. Thank you.
Thank you. And to David, I wanted to ask you, just what stands out in regards to program access, whether that be minimum, pre-release, just your experience. How did you find it? And just speak about, if you will, like those challenges.
I can only speak from access, like my own experience, especially now that I design programming for justice involved youth for a job. I noticed that nothing is culturally specific. Nothing feels like it's been individualized for the actual person. Everything feels like it's been painted with a broad brush and doesn't really allow people to really resonate with their own story, with their own history, with their own self-emotions and regulating their own mental health. It's mostly based on this is what it is. This is our critical spectrum theory, and this works for everybody, and that's what it is, and you're stuck in that box of spectrum services. And I really feel like it needs to be more hands-on, even with the case management, because these caseworkers aren't taking into account, all right, you're planning on going home here, okay, what is the median income, how much is rent over there, how do we get you a first-class security, how do we set you up economically for you to thrive in that environment specifically catered and curated for you. It's just specifically no, this is our blanket, and this is how it works, and this is how we're going to do it. Even with the classification system. So I was in MCI Concord, we were in the Tuppy program, and I'm getting classed up. No, we want you to go to Shirley so you can do Correctional Recovery Academy. But I'm like, no, in my own world, in my life, I see myself getting a graduate degree. I want to go somewhere and go to college. No, this isn't how DOC works. So we want to send you to another institution. I'm like, why? Oh no, because you need this program. But don't I know what's best for me? At the end of the day, don't I get some type of input in my own rehabilitation? Or I'm just a cog in a machine? So at the end of the day, it's about personalizing, it's about nurturing people and putting them in a position where they can thrive. It's not about, oh no, this is our blanket solution and this antidote works for everybody, so it's gonna work for you. Clearly, the numbers aren't working. And then with the fact that you guys want to implement the data tracking, with my program, I have to give data to Boston Public Schools. I have to give data to Boston Collaborative High School. I have to give data to another outside entity so they can come in and revamp my programming so they can let me know if it's working to where we stated it was going to work. Is this the best product that is thriving the youth? And we're never going to know until we get this data, we collect this data, and we sit down with the data and bring it to the forefront and be like, all right, this isn't working, now we need a new model. And then once we implement a new model, we can track that data. And that's our only way forward to make progress with these programs. So I can only speak from my own experience, but just thank you for having me.
My next question is for State Rep. Mary Keith. And I wanted to just, I heard Jamie say that he was able to, you know, broker these discussions with the commissioner. And I just wanted to kind of, what has been your experience? Whether that came through complaints, observations, and then how this culminated into your desire to get these meetings with the commissioner, and for what purpose exactly?
So the work of the caucus is, you know, Jamie and I chair it, but I think we have over 60 members in both the House and the Senate. And one of the most important parts of our work, and I do want to give a big shout out to PLS, because we're doing this together, but for us, we really rely on the work and the research and the connection that PLS brings between government and our incarcerated people. But, one of the biggest things that we do, the most important things we do, is to bring our colleagues, invite them to go visit, and to be able to sit down and hear stories from incarcerated people, to see the conditions, to actually feel, and I can't even compare any of it to what your lived experience is, but to feel it is really, really important, so that it becomes something other than just words. And in doing that, you start seeing the inconsistencies, and you start hearing the stories like you just told, David. You're making progress, you're feeling good, and all of a sudden the rug gets pulled out from under you. Your classification, which is supposed to be a positive thing, kind of measuring your progress, is working against what you feel in your heart you need, right? So in all of that, we start looking at the institution and realizing that it's not living up to all the things that you presented to us, Matt. Its mission is the opposite, it seems. And so that's where it's really important that dialogue is happening within government, so that we can move towards accountability. We can use the power that we have because we are elected by people, and make a change. And it's slow. It's frustrating and it's slow. You know, I think when you talk to average people, they think Massachusetts is great. We're doing a good job and all this. Well, you realize we aren't. You know, when you look at it on a lot of levels, we're not doing the job that we should be doing. So we met with Commissioner REICI, and we wanted to have steady accountability around some of the things, the four principles or the four priorities that our caucus has. And they are healthcare access, that includes mental health. It's education and programming. It's visitation, the lifeline back to community. And then lastly, conditions. And so we asked Commissioner REICI to meet with us on each of these. So we're trying to focus in with real substantive work at these meetings and real hard questions. And maybe, I hope, some commitment for change, because all of those four things that I just mentioned are really screwed up. So, you know, I'm glad she's sitting down with us. And that goes to the Healy administration, to our governor, right? So, Governor Healy, how are you making sure that the DOC is implementing change that's living up to its mission, and what we expect of it? So there's accountability on lots of levels that we have to make sure happens.
Thank you. And I would just, you know, I wanted to kind of just add a little bit of perspective to this, because I think that the problem is, well, as we understand it as Department of Corrections, those who experienced it, with lived experiences, is that how do we account for the money that's given to them for a purpose that they're not doing, right? And that seems to be the real challenge here. Where's the money going? How do we now implement a mechanism that would be accountable for that? And of course, the Inspector General's office is definitely something empowered to do that exact job, right? But how do we do that in a way that makes sense for everyone? And I just want to just kind of highlight this to make this point for our legislators that's here on this panel. One, SPCC, what we know today is the max, was never supposed to be built. That money was given to the Department of Corrections by the legislators to build more minimum beds. Michael Forcia, who designed the classification at the time, they took his report, went before the legislators and said, hey, this is how we alleviate the gestation. You guys have been using too much subjectiveness in your decisions. We're going to make a point-based score for that way it'll alleviate, and to make sure that we have enough beds, we're going to make more minimums and more pre-releases. The Department of Correction received that money and then decided they was going to build a maximum security prison, a second one, because Walpole was in existence at the time. Yet, no one called them on the rug. No one said anything about, wait a minute, the money was allocated this way, right? And then we see this illumined budget that's happening, right? Where they're asking for more money, and we are not even getting the basics. And so I would just ask I would turn these questions to both legislators at the table. How do we make sense of this, right? Like, how do we make sense of that?
Excellent question, and still a question that we don't fully have the answer for, and I think it's even more frustrating because last year a prison was closed, so that the maximum security prison Walpole was closed, and what I am hearing is that the new administration is thinking about closing another prison, which is very encouraging because that's going to reduce the fixed costs, right, for running prisons. And yet, to your point, Matt, the budget for DOC, as you showed in your charts, continues to go up. So, obviously we need to continue to pass legislation to reduce mass incarceration. So that's something the legislature, has to tackle. I do think that we need to do a deeper dive into the DOC budget, because if anyone that's looked at the DOC budget in terms of line item, it's just, it's basically just one line item, and then within that line item in the budget is money for programming, which I think is 1%, maybe 1%. So that's incredibly frustrating. 1%. Yep. So we need to dig into that. The number of correction officers has decreased over the past few years. For a number of reasons. There's a large number that are retiring because they generally can retire after 20 years. A good number actually refused to be vaccinated, so they were fired. It's not it's generally not the best job in the world to be a correction officer. Creates has a lot of stress and actually has one of the highest suicide rates of all professions. So I do think it's something we need to dig into, and we should have a better answer for you, but we don't have a better answer for you. But I do think now is the time. Every year, first of all, every year the legislature obviously passes a budget. So is it finally time for us to say to our colleagues, we need to cut the DOC budget right now, or is it pulling out to make sure that there's more money for programming and less for administrative overhead or staff? And those are going to be tough battles, and I think those are things that we're going to have to do a lot of organizing around. So those are my thoughts for now.
Can folks hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so I won't use the mic. I agree, everything that Jamie said. It's frustrating because it's slow and it's hard to make impact. We're really hoping to see Governor Healy step out on this because it's going to take some leadership, some real strong leadership. And I have to say it goes back on us to keep talking about this and keep pointing to the wrongness of this. And I'm really in awe of the young men that are here today to come out and to tell the story and share with us. But then it's on us to bring it home to the dinner table or to your church or wherever it is, your group of friends. You know, what you learn from being here today. We have to dispel the myths that are really stuck in people's minds around incarceration and why we do that. So it's frustrating and slow, but I do think, oh, well, let me just mention, in the last administration, the Baker administration, there was a real strong push to build a new women's prison. And if folks are aware of that, there was a quick reaction to it that was so negative. You know, all of us were very suspicious around everything you hear today. It would seem that an idea of building a new prison, well, you build it and then you'll find the people to fill it, right? So we have to be diligent and we have to be together on this. The more we learn, the more power we have. So please bring this dialogue to other places and to other people.
Thank you for that. And my next question is for Kentel. I want to have you talk about some of your challenges in and around classification, if any, going to lower security, if you have any.
Classification is tricky because it's just, I got this point-based system where they're telling you in order for you to go down to a minimum or medium, like if you're going from a maximum to a medium or a medium to a minimum, they're telling you you got to meet a certain requirement. You have to have a certain amount of points in order to get down. I think if you're going from the max to the medium, it's 11. And if you're going from a medium to a minimum, it might be like 6 or something like that. But oftentimes, like majority of the time, what I see a lot happening is just you'll have the certain amount of points that they're asking you to have, but then it'll get overridden for something that you did 5, 6 years ago, and that'll be their reason to hold you. I'm like, all right, yeah, we're not gonna send you, even though you qualified, you have the points and all of this. What you did in a couple of years ago, this matters, and this is the reason we're not sending you. Like positive adjustment or whatever they want to call it. It's like all these weird terms, pretentious terms that they use to like disguise what's really happening. So a lot of that goes on. And my own struggle with classification, it was just me going to the medium, from a medium to a minimum, it was kind of tricky because at first they wasn't trying to let me go for a couple of reasons. I was a juvenile lifer at the time, and they were saying we couldn't go down there. There had to be a law passed in order for us to go down there. And then when we were actually able to go down there, we were still getting some kind of pushback from that. So it had to be a lot of pushback until the first juvenile lifer was actually able to get down there. And so it's that, and it's frustrating. It's like, it becomes frustrating to a point because you feel like you're doing everything right, you meet all the criterias, but then, yeah, it's still that brick wall. And then for you to write a grievance or file some type of grievance as to like why you being met with this brick wall, is still it's no remedy for it. So that's even more discouraging. It's like, you know you're being wronged. You know there's something wrong with the system. You know there's something wrong with the processes, but it's just like, there's all these brick walls you're being met with, and then you're trying to get some type of, I don't know, remedy from the situation, and you can't, you pretty much can't, because it's like you you go through the grievance process and it goes to another CO. Like a person that's the grievance officer, he was the CO before. He's looking at it like, oh, all right, this is against somebody cool with. A CO he may be cool with. So it's like, it's discouraging. I don't know. It's nothing that motivates you to like get around it. But it's like we figure out ways to navigate around it. And Em was a good person. Mac is a good person to be around because he kind of like encourages you. Like, no, file this paperwork, do it. And he's pushing. It's like, yo, to make sure we know like the proper processes and know like the proper forms to fill out. But then it's like, all right, well, he'll push us in a certain direction to get these things done, but then it's still we being met with a brick wall. So it's like, that's discouraging for a lot of us. But yeah, and he was talking about caseworkers, not caseworkers, but like people in the institution as a whole. Like you go to a happy hour and you see it's a lot of white faces in happy hour. Happy hour is pretty much you go there with your grievances and you talk to a superintendent, you talk to a caseworker, director of treatment. All these people are white. You know what I'm saying? All these people are white. Everybody in this room, the majority of them, I'm not saying all of them, but the majority of them, a good 95% of them are white. So it's like, and then, hey, yo, write me a letter. That's their main thing. Write me a letter and I'll get, write the letter and the 11, you never get a response to the letter. So it's like these little things that are like, they're just nipping at you on a daily basis. It's just it's mad discouraging. And even with the caseworkers, if you look at my whole 19 years in prison, I was thinking of this like a couple months ago. Like every caseworker I've seen, like with my own eyes in 19 years, were all white except one. Like I never seen a Spanish one, I never seen a, Asian. No, they were all white. Like, and the caseworker, he or she is the one that helps the classification process. They're the ones that co-sign you going to a medium or a minimum or these things. So it's like, and that's probably why I was able to get out of the maximum, because the one black lady that I did meet, she was like, you stay out of trouble for a year, then, and I was able to stay out of trouble for a year, and I got out of there. But like, who knows where I would be if she wasn't there? You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's that. It's a lot.
And keeping on that theme, I wanted you, Ahmad, to kind of talk about your time in the minimum, and how long was you there, and at any time did you qualify for pre-release?
So I was in the minimum for upwards of 3 years, which at the time was like rare because I was one of the first wave of juvenile lifers that I was like talking about, who actually was able to access going down to lower security. So I was there for 3.5 years, and I attempted on two occasions rather, to get class down to the pre-release, because according to the information that I had available to me that like I could read as far as the policies and laws, I qualified. But whenever I attempted to like put in paperwork to get class down, I was always met with resistance. And then eventually one of the caseworkers who I kind of had a rapport with said they would look into it for me. And lo and behold, there was like some sort of like law that precludes people in my situation from going down, but it wasn't on the books, it wasn't accessible and published for us to like see, which I thought was, quite odd. So yeah, that was kind of like the main resistance I ran into with classification while I was at the minimum. A couple other things as far as access at the minimum that I ran into. So about 2 years prior to my incarceration, I decided that I wanted to become a vegetarian. And I went about it what I thought was like the kind of upright, upstanding way, which was just to kind of go to the caseworker who like controlled that, I guess, and just put in a request. So when I did that, I was asked rather, what religion was I converting to? Because I guess in order to qualify for a vegetarian diet, you had to have like some sort of religious privilege. And not wanting to lie and say I was like Buddhist or some sort of Eastern practice, even though like I kind of like those stuff. Yeah, I just said, it's a lifestyle thing. I'm trying to be healthier. I'm trying to be a vegetarian. And I was again met with resistance. And in fact, I was at one of those happy hours with a sea of white faces. And the lady that I spoke to was actually very dismissive in telling me that that I wasn't going to get access to a vegetarian diet. That's as far as classification. That was the only resistance I was met with in terms of trying to get class down to a minimum to pre-release. So, to your point earlier, you could kind of start that acclimation process, right, of stepping down from prison to society. But they consistently denied not just me, but other people in my position, and I suffered the consequences on the back end, right? So now, coming home after having served upwards of 15 years in prison, going in as a kid, now coming home, emerging as a young man, but still very much immature, so ignorant to just certain basic things that are kind of just commonplace for any sort of adult in my situation. It's basic things like giving people access to work employment opportunities while inside would go a long way in really getting people ready and prepared on day one to kind of make something of themselves once they're released. So for me, I felt that very, very much so.
And I think that's one of the things you got to emphasize the most is that there are all these things that you could probably go online for these prisons or wherever, and on paper, it would say all these beautiful things that we have in there. You know what I'm saying? On paper, it would say all these beautiful things that we have in there, but you go inside the prison and you talk to the people that are in the institution, nah, we don't have that. So it's it may be passed, it may be something that's enacted and pushed forward, but the way it's being executed is not the same. It's not the same.
So to give y'all some kind of pretext.
Can I add just a quick thing?
Go ahead,
That's something
sure.
we're directly looking to, so I appreciate you mentioned that. That's directly meeting, something came up in the meeting of the commissioner. Yep.
So just to give y'all a little context to what Ahmad and what Kentel is talking about in regards to juvenile lifers. So at a period of time, Massachusetts recognized juvenile lifers and between the ages of 17. If you was convicted at the age of 17, you now was not supposed to be treated, your crime itself was not supposed to be treated as a adult offender. So it allowed, what it allowed was that you can now get access to minimums, whereas if you're an adult offender, under the current classification system, you can't get access to lower security. But even when that first arose, what the Department of Correction did was kind of go back on some of the recommendations that they did early on and said, okay, now we want to put them through a parole type classification hearing, which is, it's not even in the statute what they're doing, right? They just decided we're going to conduct a mock parole situation hearing for class specifically for this group to make it almost impossible. Meaning that you have to come before the class board and say, I'm guilty of the crime in order to qualify to go down, right? And if you don't go down to lower security unless parole paroles you. And even then, they still have an issue with that. This is something that I'm speaking from experience, right? So I'm telling you that this is not makeshift. What my brother Ahmad had just explained about some of those challenges that he faced. Well, there actually isn't nothing legally that bars that segment of black population from going down to pre-release. But what they have done is reinterpret and said, well, we still, now keep in mind, I just want to give you context. The rule is, the law is, you cannot use the conviction to deny programs of a juvenile offender. You cannot use their conviction. The law in which my brother was referring to relies on a person's conviction of life sentence that precludes him from pre-release. And that was what they was interpreting and saying it still applied to him, even though they knew that it doesn't. And this is the type of awkward, backwards type of thing that they do, which only has the detrimental impact. And I say it's detrimental because at some point, people stop believing that the law actually is the law. The rule actually is the rule. It really comes to whoever's in power get to dictate whatever goes. And if we live in a society of whatever goes, then what type of society are we? Are we going back to the cowboys and Indians? Like, what are we doing? So we have to raise the real question about the impact of the legitimacy of what the department is doing, and even how, and in these situations, that we can see how they structurally will deny folks. I'm happy to say that at least today, I know one of my brothers is in a pre-release, and it has to do a lot with these types of efforts that we're doing out here in the community, educating folks about this very same practice, about what they do. Now, they just told my brother when he was in for 3 years in a minimum, he wasn't qualified, and yet another juvenile lifer today is in pre-release under the actual practices that they're supposed to be applying. So I just wanted to kind of educate you so you understand these are the challenges that they're facing. And David, I wanted you to kind of talk to, I mean, you weren't a juvenile lifer, yet did you get access to pre-release?
No, I did not. Ever. And I wanted it so badly because that's your safety net. You're coming home with a couple dollars in your pocket. You're not worried about being homeless. You can feed your daughter. Like, I have a daughter to feed. Like, I have a grown little girl at home who's 5 feet tall, 100 pounds, and she eats like a linebacker. So she don't want corner store chicken. She wants to eat good food. So it's like, that was my ultimate worry. So it's like, I was striving for that every chance I could. And at every corner, no, we need you to complete culinary arts. No, we need you to complete CRA. No, we need you to complete school. No, it just seemed like they put up another barrier. Every time I completed one, oh, if you complete this one more thing. And it just never came to actualization.
Go ahead.
Yo, because I was over there, so they got the minimum and they got pre-release. So what I noticed was that, you know, that one tier is the only one that's pre-release, but you would see like the little workforces that they have over there, which would be for like what, the stable, the clean up the other clean up the other prisons. You would see all the black people on those, like those ones where you can't earn money, those slave type jobs, like you would see all the black people, all the Spanish people on those, and then you look at pre-release, and pre-release is like, if it's like 15, 14 people over there, it might be like one black person. It was one black, the token black person. It was like,
We used to call him the Jackie Robinson
the
of
Jackie
pre-release.
Robinson of pre-release.
The Jackie Robinson of pre-release.
Yo,
That's
he
how
got
sad
in
it
there,
was.
we was mad happy, and then he got locked. Like, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's visible. It's not like, you can see it.
I want y'all to really listen to what they're saying, though.
I hear them.
Listen to what they're saying. I mean, that's how crazy it is. Like, for you to see a black person, and I you know, we all have a personal friend who actually made it down to pre-release, and in a matter of maybe 60 days, they lugged him under an investigation, which he was never found guilty of, and never returned to the pre-release. Now, I can't emphasize this enough. This is why we need a level of accountability, someone who will be able to go in, demote, break down these types of structures, and enforce what's supposed to be enforced across the board for everyone. And it's not to say that white folks don't experience these types of biases, because most of them, if they are advocates, that's when they really face what they call the black discrimination. You know, they treat them like everybody else. But for the most part, everyone recognizes that there is a privilege based in existence inside a prison. And as you know, some of the legislators already acknowledged, they receive this information from those inside, acknowledging that privilege base, whether that's jobs, whether that's classification, whether that's different opportunities that's not afforded to Black and brown folks on the average. And yet, when these folks come back out into society, they come back out handicapped, and really, they already entered, for most part, with post-traumatic stress, and then that's exacerbated by this experience, and then they go back out, and what do you think is going to happen? It's only a matter of time. Well, I'm just asking, what type of department, like any type of department that we know today, if they're releasing a flawed manufacturing item, right? Well, we get up in arms about that, don't we? We want to sue, we want to get all types of things, but what about what the Department of Corrections releasing?
That's a good analogy.
You know? Do we not have that same entitlement, that same right, that same abhor? You hear that? I mean, we should. And I guess that's what I want to, I'm sorry, I kind of got lost in my thoughts for a second.
That was great.
Yeah, so I just wanted to get back. Hold on, I'm going to check the time, 2:45, and I wanted to at this time, because I know one of our guests has to get ready to leave real soon, and I wanted to kind of take this time to open up the floor for some questions to our panelists, and I wanted to thank our panelists for please. And now, we'll get our person to run the mic.
You can take one.
Thank you. My name is Sal. My name is Sal Ali. You hear me?
Yes.
I'm honored to be amongst you men. I spent most of my life around you men. Same, very intelligent, very smart. I met Mary Keith, St. Eldridge, while I was incarcerated. I was sentenced to life for bank robbery. 30 years ago, that's what I had to do with no loss of life. After 9/11, Department of Corrections started targeting the Black Muslims, labeling them as terrorists, and I was one of them. Had to go to court for it. Took me, placed me in isolation for 21 days. Wouldn't tell me why. It took 8 years for them to disclose the record. It's all blacked out. Departments of Correction cooperate with state and federal agencies, and they don't want to release the federal information. I can't go into details because they got a protective court order against me not to do it. So it took 8 years to get that in the court order for them to do it. The Department of Corrections had 5 attorneys, thousands of dollars to conceal that. So everywhere I was going, I couldn't go nowhere, even because they didn't want to let me go for whatever reasons, and that was one of them. He's a terrorist. I wouldn't even pop a firecracker on the 4th of July. I wasn't convicted of terrorist charges, but that's what they had been doing. The public doesn't hear about it much, but it exists. It's been ongoing for years, and you know that. If you're black in this group, that group, it's in there, he's this, he's that, and you don't know it. You find yourself trapped behind the wall, can't go nowhere class. Why? They got that secret information, and like I said, they just turned it over to me. It took 8 years. So when I met you at Shirley, I had been taken out of Gardner prison. I had met with students. I worked. Not a terrorist, none of that. But at their internal security, feel that you are this group, part of that group, and that's what you are. It's on record, it's in the courts, it's transcribed. I wonder if you're familiar with that.
Idola has it. I listen, and inside I weep. Because we know that institutions are isolated. And it's easy to get away with stuff when nobody knows what's going on inside. and that's horrendous. And there are certain fields that people go into that are prejudiced. And there's nothing that we can really do about that. It's hard to police that. There has to be some way that prison reform needs to get people in there and be able to talk to the people, not so much that work there, but the people that live there. There just has to be a way to police that. And it's the same way with police. It's the same type of thing. The majority of police, and I hate to say it, if they're not prejudiced when they go on the job, they're told, we don't like these people, we don't like those people. And I think that's how it happens. It's not that they all go in there prejudiced. It's behavioral. We learn that. They learn that. So we have to protect the people that are living somehow. So with prison reform, we need to have some kind of, I don't know what we would call them, volunteers or something, some kind of committees, something. Because we absolutely have to protect the people that are there. Thank you.
I just have a quick question. I see our representative Mary Keith here from Worcester. I live in Worcester. Oh, I just wanted to see is there more representatives and senators that are on board with you guys that are having these same conversations? If so, is it like council, like is it an advisory? Is there a name for it? I want to speak on a statement that he said as far as representation as far as correctional officers go. How in the climate with the battle between police and, that they're bad and, it's a stain on the community, how do we as a community or you guys make it inviting for people of color to want to apply for those jobs? Because I think even though Massachusetts is seeing a decrease in correctional officers, it's a nationwide thing. I have a brother-in-law that lives up in upstate New York, and it's the same thing. Overtime is a huge impact to them because they don't have enough people. So I want to know, like, how are all these things being incorporated? And I want to commend you guys for coming and speaking, and thank you and welcome. I do have a stepbrother that's up in, I think it's Shirley now, but second degree as well, and he went in as, a juvenile in some sense, but he's also found those walls where it's every time he's gonna go get released, something happens, and a fight will, and I think it's the mental health piece of it. So you know that it's not gonna happen for you, you come back. There's other people that are watching that too, so they try to get the best out of you. So, I don't know, it's like a statement, comment, question, but I just want to add that all in. Thank you guys for coming.
Hold on, one of y'all want to answer?
Yeah, one of y'all
Hold on, let's let them answer first. Okay.
Why don't we talk about the caucus?
Sure.
I think. So your first question is, are there other legislators doing this? And when we talk about a caucus, it's not a committee. We don't hold hearings. What we do try and do is bring panels like this one into the State House, and we invite our colleagues and staff allies as well, or PLS comes very often to talk about specific issues that we see that needs our attention. For our colleagues, we have about maybe 63 members of our caucus, and they come to the prisons with us to visit and learn. The briefings are really so that we can understand better. And as legislation comes forward, we're informed. We know what needs to be tweaked, how it could be better. You know, the women's prison initiative to build it, that was critical, that we could all understand why. Why were they saying this? Why is there a need? And to keep poking those holes in what the plan was. So it's some work to get people, those legislators, I mean, Senator Eldridge is kind of an anomaly in some ways, but like Liz Miranda, who was going to be here, her family, like yours, is greatly, greatly impacted. And her constituents are impacted, you know, so those electeds are easier to sort of, they get it, they see it right in front of them, right? It's in their family, it's on the street, it's in our neighborhoods. And then there are a lot of people that just understand we need to, if it's not my issue in my district, I see this as a great wrong and an injustice, and I'm going to step in.
Yeah, I would add to the appreciate the questions and comments, and I would first of all say, you know, whether you're here in Worcester or wherever you live, is asking, you know, your state rep and state senator, you know, are you part of the Criminal Justice Reform Caucus? You know, there are 63 members, but there's 200 legislators, so we need more legislators to join the caucus. And then I will say, unfortunately, of those 63, maybe 10 to 20 actually visit prisons. So even within the caucus, it's a challenge to get, you know, many legislators to visit prisons. And that has been a big push of ours, is to say every single member of the Criminal Justice Reform Caucus should be doing a visit. And sort of an obvious statement, but the main reason legislators don't want to go into prisons is they don't want to be seen as quote unquote weak on crime, right? They're probably a little bit afraid to go into a prison because they don't know what to expect. And I think it's just at the end of the day, they made a decision to focus their time on other issues and not criminal justice reform or racial justice. So at the end of the day, as much as Rep. Keefe and I, you know, can urge our colleagues to do this, it's really, you know, basically, progressive, you know, brown and black people of color constituents, the public, to reach out to your legislators to encourage them to do that. As far as the prisons, I mean, I think the thing I really want to stress is that, you know, there's so much to do to improve conditions in the prisons, but at the end of the day, I want to continue to decrease the number of people in prison, right? So we want to continue to advocate for ending mass incarceration. We want to continue to close prisons, because no matter what, you know, slight improvements happen in the prisons, it's still a terrible place for everyone, you know, both incarcerated people, but also correction officers. So as far as recruiting a more diverse workforce, and that is one of the recommendations, is the DOC certainly needs to do more outreach to communities of color to hire people, and they are beginning to do that. But you know, that, you know, to Kentel's point about, you know, his experience, you know, at happy hour interacting with, you know, caseworkers or staff, it's an extremely white workforce, and I think it's going to take a long time to change that. So, but that is beginning to happen as far as the outreach, and the people that are retiring, who, you know, just because of the nature of the increasing diversification of residents, most of the correction officers who are retiring are white, so it's an opportunity to hire more black and brown people as correction officers or staff. So I don't know if that fully answered your questions, but.
Can I add in real quick just to that?
Of course.
So, I know that a lot of the correctional officers were let go because of not getting vaccinated.
Yep.
Is there any way or room that you could, as a state, maybe alleviate that? Because I know that, I don't know if it was in New York as well, but there was a judicial, hearing that they came down to all the people that were fired for not being vaccinated had to be rehired. So I just wanted to ask that.
I think some have been rehired. I'd also say almost all of the correctional officers who refuse to be vaccinated are white.
Okay. Thank you.
So, my first question, now I can't ask because you said something that bothered me. So you stated that the people on this caucus, the legislators, that are supposed to be here for the people, right? They're supposed to be fighting for the people, are afraid to go into the jail because they don't know what the conditions will be? How does that make sense to you? Well, I'm not saying to you literally, but how does that make sense? Because if you're for the people, you shouldn't be afraid of the people. Because if you're afraid of the people, you can't work for the people. You understand what I'm saying? So that bothers a lot. So that means that the people that are at the table that know and understand what that is, because you're agreeing with me, you haven't checked those people to hold them accountable for them being afraid of the people that they're supposed to be fighting for. So that's a problem to me. And I love that you're doing that face because I love y'all right now. Listen, I see you and I heard you. Okay, so there's that. Second, the intentions of all of these programs and the people that are coming to say, I want to fight for all of this, right? Sounds so wonderful. It sounds so pretty on paper. And it looks good for those that are applying for all these monies that come into this jail, right? But integration of it is the issue. Because if they integrate it, then that's taking away from the power that they had. Because nobody knew what was happening, right? So I don't know how to frame that in a right way where it sounds like politically correct. But if the intention is cool. But if you can't integrate it without you feeling like it's being taken out of your own pocket, there's a problem. And I feel like that's the biggest issue with DOC. Now, this happy hour, now there's a lot that, y'all said, so I'm trying to get it all out right. So this happy hour, right, where you have these sea of white folks to tell you, send me a letter, so I can then help you. But how do they get the money for the letter? Because you need a stamp, right, in order to do it. And then they have these new integrations, JPay, right? But I didn't put money on that for people. And it don't make it to my people. Now it makes it to those I send that cash app to them. It goes to them and it gets to the right people. But I have a son right now in Rikers. He's asking me, he's trying to do the grievances. The cops gave him a concussion. He's suing this, suing that, suing this. He's like, Mom, I need $30 for this. I need $20 for this. They're only giving me a week and a half to mail it though. Now again, how are you helping those that you say you're supposed to be helping? I don't understand. Now the burden comes on the families that are dealing with our kids or loved ones that are in jail. It's coming out of our pocket. But you're not helping us, you're helping them. So it's like all of this sounds really good. And I like that there's a caucus and you have committees and all that. But until you get real people like myself in there, you're not going to move for it because you have people that are always going to play the field like, oh, it's okay. We can wait next year to do it. No, we can't. The thing is now. Do it now. I don't need to wait 2 years for it to change. If you know the problem is here, now do it now. That's me. But then, before you even get to jail, so I have personal experience, as you probably tell. I had a child that was self-defending himself. He stabbed 2 people. He was stabbed. My son got arrested. Never been in trouble in his life. Never been in trouble in his life. They put him in, do all the dangerousness hearing and all this mess, right? Let him out. Get the tape. You see my son was jumped by 3 people. Yet, you don't want to charge anybody else but him. Then, you put it on his record. You put him on probation before he's found guilty. So now you have this record of dangerous dangerous or felony, whatever it was, right? Now you tell him you gotta have a job. How do you get a job if you have a felony on your record? You can't. But then you're penalizing him because he doesn't have a job. So now you think, oh, well, because you can't get a job, that means you're a bad kid. No, you're setting these kids up to fail. And what needs to happen is you are innocent until proven guilty. You are not innocent if you're black or brown. It's not a thing. And that needs to change too. Because you're hurting our kids from the moment they get home with no institution of anything. And the parents are the ones that are suffering. The kids are the ones that are suffering. And the only people that are making money are the judges and the lawyers. That'll be my last thing.
Can I comment on that?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is, you know, a lot of times in the Justice Caucus, the system is broken, and the longer I've served as a legislator, I say, no, the system is working as designed, right? It's designed from a you know, racist, classist point of view to hold down poor people, to hold down people of color, and that everything that you've experienced reflects that, right? So the challenge is major challenge, not just obviously in the prisons, but all of society. And I think what I would say is that why are legislators not going in? Because if a legislator does go in, then he or she has to deal with this, right? So by not going into prison, they don't have to deal with any of this, and they can focus on sort of simpler things, right? So the challenge is, you know, to reach out to legislators to get them to go into the prisons. And we can, you know, Rep. Keefe and I can do as much as we can to encourage our colleagues to do it, but constituent-based, constituents contacting their legislators is going to be a much higher chance of legislators going into the
Okay. So I 100% agree with you that constituents have to be more involved, right? However, it usually only falls on the black and brown people to be the ones to step up and do this. And it's like we have to keep reliving and reliving. Educate you, we have to make sure that we're coddling you because it's so tough to have these conversations if you're looking at things through a different view. Like the issue is that you have too much work in order for you to get a job. So my thing is that I can be this person to always be there, stand up and talk. But if there's no work being done on that end, where you're realizing that this is internally for you as well, it's never going to work. So it's like I understand what you're saying. How do we get past that, right? Because this side is cool, we gotta work on the other side.
No.
I'm probably not done.
This is a welcome discussion. Welcome discussion, and your points are very valid. But I think that sometimes we have to kind of look at this from a context view, right? With the perspective in mind is that the reason why it's gotten so far is for many reasons we've been shut out the process, right? We have now gotten to a point where we elevate ourselves, and we did this behind the wall, right? We've created programs, we created outreach, we actually helped elect some folks that came back behind the wall and actually start advocating on our behalf. But this is something that we had to take accountability for ourselves, first and foremost, right? And mandate those others. And much of what we're trying to do here by coming out to Worcester and talking to those folks in Worcester about this problem, and then going to other jurisdictions and talking to them about the very same thing, so that we can all get on the same page and start creating this pressure to those legislators who are not doing this type of work. And this is the idea. We are at war. And I want you to understand what that means, right? I mean, because I don't think that we truly get it. We are at war. That means that wherever we find that type of level of resistance, we need to be going into their community, getting up campaigns, voting these folks out, and getting the folks in that agree with what it means to be an America for everyone. That's the whole idea, conceptually, right? And so maybe some of us don't think we got the ability to do it. I think we do. That's why I'm here today, right? I think that this is part of a solution. Trying to get this bill out, trying to create some sort of level of accountability so it takes it out of our hands of saying, hey, we know what's going on, but they say there's no evidence of it. Okay, we need data now. we get the data and we show you what's really happening, right? And part of this challenge that the Structural Commission faced was that they heard all these men's type testimony, but there was no data to support that, right? Because the department would say, hey, that was an isolated incident. This was an isolated incident over here. So there's a lot of moving pieces to this, and I want you to kind of understand that we're in the midst of it. If you're sitting in this chair, if you're on this audio listening, then you are in the midst of actually building that solution of accountability everywhere. And please come with us. Every jurisdiction we go, that's what we want to do. You know what I'm saying? I hope that answers some of your questions.
A little bit. Not a lot, but a little bit. But I'm going to talk to you after because other people need to.
Okay, all right.
She's audience.
I just wanted to thank you, Chantel, for.
I know Mary and Jay.
Yeah. We're at a lot of things together.
They know me.
But I want to speak to the other thing about institutional change. And so we're here mostly talking about prisons and incarceration. I said this a long time ago. I really didn't get the school to prison pipeline. I didn't get it. And then in the last 10 years, I couldn't believe how clear it was that our institutions are failing our young people, and it is the pipeline, okay? I'll give you an example. I had two parents, two dads, that came to me soon after I was elected, and I knew them in community, and they had both didn't know each other, and they both had 5th grade boys. One was Puerto Rican, and the other one was from Cameroon. And they both came to me, and they were really upset. And their 5th grade, their sons were struggling in school, academically. What do 5th grade boys do when they're embarrassed that they're not able to do it, right? Do the classwork or just be the kind of student that their teacher expects? They get frustrated. They act out. So both of these dads went to those parent conferences, and sat down and looked at the report. And in the report it said, potentially dangerous to self and to others. Wow. Okay? And the dads were kind of out of their minds. One of them had been incarcerated. He knew what that meant. That's a legal document. That's a legal document that follows those boys. Okay? So it's this conversation that we're having, but it's also that conversation, right? And when we are locked out, that's when that kind of stuff happens. And when we're not talking to each other, that's when we don't know. And we have to call it out for the injustice that it is, right? So organizing, community, and talking to each other and sharing those stories. Yeah.
Thank you, Ricky, for sharing this, and everyone else for sharing their experiences to try to shed some light on the functions of the prisons. I think a big disconnect on this is with elected officials not even wanting to show up to prisons is that that's not their constituency. Felons are not able to vote, and I think everybody in this room should definitely sign the statewide petition to put that on the ballot to allow felons to vote. This year, the state legislature, I actually just read the article, was posted a day ago, about no-cost calls. That there's a big disconnect between how policy is passed and how it's implemented. How would we ensure that these no-cost calls are implemented equitably, and so it's intended? Yeah, that's my question.
Yeah, so that's something that Mary and I will be working on directly because, and it shows you a whole other level of how disturbing our prison system is that currently the company that provides, allows phone calls for incarcerated people, it's a private company, Securus, and on top of the fact that, you know, charging outrageous fees, and the profits it makes off of that, they actually own the infrastructure in our prisons, right? And it's a pretty bad system overall. So what we've started doing, and glad that no-cost calls is now law, became law this week, and that, I want to emphasize, that was organized really and led by formerly incarcerated people. As a woman, Andrea James, formerly incarcerated, head of Families for Justice's Healing, that did a lot of work on that, and other organizations too. But now that that's law, it is about the implementation. That's really where the caucus needs to work at securing, really I think probably the millions of dollars to upgrade the system. I'm very proud that the no-cost calls law is, as far as we can tell, it's the strongest law in the country of the 5 states that have passed this into law. So very, very proud of that. But now it's the implementation. So we need to get, millions of federal dollars, state dollars to upgrade the system to actually make it a reality that there are free calls for incarcerated people and their loved ones. So that's what we'll be working on now, and it is going to, it's going to take a lot of hard work by the administration and the legislature. Thank you.
Good evening. For so I just wanted to make touch on 2 points. First, in the presentation, we see that the population, the prison population, is going down, and it is evident, it is correct. I work in the Worcester justice system and the Worcester House of Correction, and that is the case. It is going down. However, if you want a CO job, you can get a CO job here. They're always hiring CO. So why is that the case? Population is going down, but they're always on recruit for CO. So I don't know why that is. If the population is going down, then you need less COs. The other thing that I wanted to touch on, Rep. Keith, you mentioned the focus areas that you guys are working on, but from someone that has been on the inside, something that I would wish I had heard you state, I didn't, which is training. Because when I was going through training, in my training sessions, my week-long training, the jail itself have its own training department. And those trainers are COs and superintendents and sergeants themselves. And why I touched on that is, if we are being trained by the people on the inside, they are corrupting our minds coming in. Because I know people that are coming as a new CO and they're like, oh, I want to be this great CO and everything. But after that 60 week of training, their mind is corrupt. I was sitting in training one day, and the senior superintendent of the jail, he said to us, these people, when they get out of here, they're coming right back. They're only going out there to make some money, to put on their books, and come back because they know nothing but here. Now, that's not something you want to say to new people who want to be a decent CO. After my training, and I was in the field working and stuff like that, my job was to work with the people on the inside 4 months before they come out, and then after they're out, to acclimate them back into society. And that was my job as a people person, as a community engagement person, and stuff like that. I know how to relate to people, get down to their level, bring them to mine, and stuff like that, and just building that rapport. And building rapport with these people, they have already served their time. You want me to know, get them back into society, but then my boss is going to tell me, no, you can't do that. They're criminals. You got to treat them like doing by people who are not on the inside, because they're corrupting our minds, coming in wanting to do better.
Thank you guys so much for being here today. My question is more so for the representatives here with us today. I think the fact that the Department of Corrections has more power over our legislators is asinine. I know even the few legislators that they get turned away, or people that they're trying to visit can't come out for whatever reason. They give no explanation whatsoever for doing so. Besides this bill, what is your legislative plan to start to dismantle or unravel all the power that the DOC has, and also for the activists on the inside who are doing great work behind the wall, who are trying to start programming that the DOC holds up or stops and are punished for with bogus disciplinary tickets or getting thrown solitary, like Raylan Coleman was been in there for months, and others who are in there for days, months, years at a time for the work that they do. How are we going to protect these individuals who do like such great things and who we need back home? And we know things like these disciplinary tickets, like these affect people's ability to get home. So how are you guys going to ensure that these people are protected?
Let me start. Yeah. First of all, great things are happening on the parole board and the parole process. So we're watching that closely, and we're advocating strongly around new practices, new leadership within that division of how people get released. Second of all, there's a rumor that Commissioner Amici may be retiring. And if that's the case, we better be ready to put pressure on Governor Healy to put the right person in place. Because without that right person with the governor, just like Kathleen Dennehy that we talked about earlier, with the right person, they can lead and they can make some important changes. So for us in the legislature, with all of you, let's be ready. If that retirement is announced, we've got to have a strong voice about who takes her place.
Rep Keith, sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to ask, does the state legislature or the governor's council approve that appointment?
It would be the governor.
The governor or the
I think so.
Just the governor.
No, just the governor.
Oh, so there's no, like, checks and balances on that?
Nope. He serves at the leisure of the governor, at the pleasure of the governor.
If I could just add to answer your question, is first of all, unless you know of something different, I don't think any legislators have been turned away in prison. So we do get to, that's in statute that we can go to any prison. So I know there's been some issues with access to certain documents, and so that was one of the things we brought up with Commissioner Amici recently, because there are more legislators going into the prisons. I think this is why the bill that PLS is leading on, the independent correctional oversight bill, is so important, because certainly more legislators need to go into prison, but there really needs to be an independent agency, have the ability to question DOC staff and correction officers directly, to have some ability to fine or punish them if they don't act appropriately, and have stronger oversight. Unless there's that independent agency, I think it is going to be hard for the legislature as it's currently made up to do more. So I don't know if that fully answers your question.
I just wanted to add, if I could, I think there's a disconnect between what the governor's office can do and what the legislative body can do. And I always felt like that, right? Like, I don't think that we know enough about how our government's supposed to function, and so we're always asking legislators and them to do something that perhaps the governor herself is the only one empowered to do. So when we're talking about selecting a new commissioner, that's definitely the governor. When we're talking about how rules and regulations are enforced, how they interpret, well, that is a question for the governor. The governor is the one that does that. And we're talking about how folks get retaliated against and all that. Sure, you can complain to your legislators about that, and they can make a call to the commissioner, and guess what? The commissioner can say, yeah, we're gonna look into it and never get back to them. The only one that the commissioner is mandated to answer to is the governor. The governor is the commissioner's boss. That's the way it goes, right? And so we gotta understand structurally how the makeup is, so that we can get the accountability that we're looking for. And even the EOPS, you know, which is the public safety personnel, they are beholden to the governor, and that is the overseer of the Department of Corrections. So I think that many of this could be, good conversation to actually get the governor, down and ask her about. But I think at the same time, I think we have to be realistic, and I agree with what Mayor Keefe said and the senator. We have to be intentional about who gets into this next seat, who becomes the commissioner. And the governor is beholden to us, the people. And so, you know, we're just as a part of the process. And I think that's what I'm kind of trying to emphasize the most. We are just as much a part of that process, and she has to listen to what we have to say.
You know, when the governor's race was on, this was an important question that needed to be asked of her, and it didn't get asked, right? I'm not slamming Governor Healy, but I'm saying our process was kind of flawed here, that there wasn't a public debate where things we've talked about today didn't happen.
This is a question, but I thought I would seize on the opportunity. The petition that was mentioned for felony grade enfranchisement, there are 5 more days to sign the petition. I have petitions if people would be interested in signing. The fact that we are neglecting citizens from the constituency that would be holding these people accountable is disgusting, and we have an opportunity right now to change that. So I really encourage everybody who's registered to vote in Massachusetts to sign this petition. So find me after you can sign it. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Shelley Tenenbaum. I'm a professor here at Clark University, and I'm also a professor at the Emerson Prison Initiative, and I co-direct a tuition-free college program here at Clark University for formerly incarcerated people. If anyone has any questions, please see me. First of all, just thank you to all the panelists, but most of all, thank you, Mac. Mac, thank you for your wisdom, your moral leadership, and the work that you did both on the inside and now on the outside. So thank you for organizing it. I have 2 questions, one related to programming and the other related to classification. So programming, to the best of my knowledge, all of the college in prison programs, the ones Vitas, Emerson, BC, they're all funded by the colleges. And the Boston Community Foundation issued, I think, a really important report last year comparing, this relates, Representative Keefe, to what you were saying. We think of Massachusetts as this liberal bastion. So compared, I think, to California, New York, New Jersey, that the state funds college and prison programs. We do not. We have some grants that people can apply for, but there is no funding. And it's just not a sustainable model. We need to have funding for college and prison programs. And there are so many more students who want to be involved, want to get in, that are turned away. I forget what the numbers are, but from what I remember at Norfolk, and you might know Matt, you might know Sally, but you know, it's something like 20 students a year when there are over 100 applicants. Yeah. We can do much, much better. So first question, is there any attempt in terms of legislative agenda of implementing the Boston Community Foundation's suggestion, recommendation, to have state funding Related to classification, I was recently at Sousa for a reentry event representing the program that I co-direct here, and I was really taken aback. I was really surprised at the number of men who told me that from Sousa, they were being released in like a week to 10 days. And again, there's something very odd about the classification system, that there were people being released with almost no programming and almost no services from Sousa. And I was just wondering, including you, Matt, but other people on the panel, if you could shed some light on this, and is this really a good idea? Thank you.
Sure. So thank you so much, Shelley, and thank you what you've done here at Clark. So on the public higher education piece, is that beyond the Boston Foundation report, the New England Commission on Public Higher Education participated, so all the New England states, on a report, and Commissioner Michi, to her credit, was a big part of that. So I think there's support for that, to get more state funding for public higher education. I think it would also be good to have public higher ed institutions participating. So Mount Wachusett Community College participates right now, but we're trying to get more of them. And there is, I think you and I got a little bit of money in the budget for public higher education in prisons in the FY24 budget. So we are trying to increase that. And obviously, this is part of what Mary has filed, and former State Senator Sonia Chang does, is this justice reinvestment model, right? Is as we close prisons, taking the millions of dollars, not just quote unquote taxpayer savings, but actually investing it in programming, whether in the communities that have been disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs and mass incarceration, or the prisons. So that's something we're hoping to begin to make that shift over the next year.
Yeah, and I could add that while we were taking college classes and while we were incarcerated, it just felt like we were like 1%ers. Like it was a 700 man camp, and 30 of us are on track to get a college degree. So now we're coming back talking about the glory of class and how wonderful it is to try to make something happen, make a change, but we feel bad because we can't share this glory with people who want to get a college degree. So it's just there's not enough classroom space, there's not enough funding to pay educators, so there's a whole lot. We need to really reinvest in that, because that's proven to reduce the recidivism rates, especially when they're at 70%. Somebody with a college degree is less than 5%. So like that's our only way to really attack this and kind of give guys another path to not come back.
And it's people. I think people be thinking it's the schools paying for it. Like I know Tough is like privately funded. It's like this is money that they boots on the ground, they raising it by talking to people that's willing to invest in us. Like so, it's not always a situation the state's paying for it or the institution's paying for it. No, that's coming from the pocket of people that just believe in higher education in prison, and then they just donating whatever they can. It may be $50, it may be $100, it may be $100. That's where that money's coming from. So it's like it's understandable that they don't have the money to fund the 600 people that's in the institution, so they can only do what they got. And hopefully that changes. We was just in a conference in Atlanta, National Conference for Higher Education in Prison. There was just people from California, Seattle, New Jersey, people from Iowa. They got people in jail in Iowa. Like, it was just so many people from so many different programs. But one thing that stuck out to me is in California, it's just like every prison, every upstate prison has a contract with a community college. I'm like, what? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, why that ain't out here?
Exactly.
It's not like we got 100 upstate facilities. Like, it's probably like 8 or 9. Like, why is this not everywhere? Like, why is it not accessible to everybody? So I don't know. That was like, we went there and we was able to see the flaws that Massachusetts has in their college programs as opposed to some of the other ones. But I understand it's like stepping stones, it's baby steps, but.
And a lot of these programs had like self-sustaining models. Yeah. Maine has a model where students are hired as teachers, they get interns, they're able to work remotely, they're paying, instead of the state having to pay for their living costs, they're making $50,000 working remote. So they're taking care of their own living expenses, they're sending money home to their family. So instead of making it a burden, they can provide. And there's a workforce, Massachusetts is like a corporate hub. There's a workforce that needs remote learners. And we can set it up where they can get access to a laptop in the school building and be able to create a living and add and contribute to society instead of taking tax dollars.
I just wanted to say that even today, avocation is still on the books. So avocation allowed folks to set up their own individual businesses while they were in prison. And that was in the early 70s all the way up to the 80s, and they stopped it like late 80s, right? And people were earning money in the way that David described, where they was taking care of their families, coming home. So even if they didn't qualify for furloughs or wasn't able to, get out to a pre-release, they was able to accumulate some money to help with their transition, and then take that business model out and duplicate that business out there in the world. So since they stopped it, it's done created now a black market within the prison, where everyone's trying to figure out how do they compensate for the bare minimum money that they get, which is usually on average $10 a week. $10 to buy soap and food it's unsustainable.
And like, to really talk about the employment in there, like, the base job is $1 a day. I used to get 50 cents in my savings and 50 cents in my checkings, and I would work 5 days a week, and I would make $250 in a week in my account. A bag of coffee was $3, and a phone call to my daughter was $265. So you tell me I had to work a whole week, and I couldn't even call my kid. How is that a sustaining model?
Right. Absolutely. Yep. So at this time, I want to bring this session to a close. I know that you guys probably want to intermingle with some of our panelists.
Yes, we
do.
do.
Before we close out, I do want to thank Shelley Tenenbaum for helping us put this together. Thank Chloe for going out here advocating for us. Tanisha, come on, put your hands together. Prison Legal Services also, and all the many folks that helped bring this thing together, including our distinguished panelists. Thanks.